Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back. Today's video I'm going to be talking about pharmaceuticals. So we know that the term pharmacia or pharmakia, something like that in the Greek, is used in the Bible, and it's been translated to basically mean sorcery or witchcraft, the use of magical potions. If you look at AI, I'm always so cautious about what AI tells me, but sometimes it's just easier to get an answer from AI. But AI is kind of saying, while the root is the basis for modern pharmacy, its biblical usage refers to the misuse of drugs, including potions, poisons, hallucinogens, in pagan worship, addiction, or manipulation to deceive. And then if we look at the Bible, what the Bible says about this word. So in Galatians 5, verse 16 to 20, it says, "So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with one another, so that you are not to do whatever you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. The acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft," that's the word for pharmakia, "hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions," so on and so forth. So the Bible's warning us against using potions, etc. I know it's not considered part of the biblical canon, but it's interesting that in Jubilees, which is in the Ethiopian Bible, which is neither here nor there, I know people argue either side, but it's just interesting that in Jubilees it states that God created a list of cures for people, which would probably include diet, it would probably include, sunshine, exercise, all those things that we know today, but rather than stepping into man-made medications, I would imagine, obviously just my imagination talking, but I would imagine it would include certain herbs and spices and things like that. However, man has decided to become God, obviously, and create its own medications. And I just want to read for you there's at least two more verses that have the word pharmakia in it in the Bible. But one of them is Revelation 18, verses 23 to 24. And it says, "Even the light from a lamp will never shine in you again. The voices of the bridegroom and his bride will never be heard in you again. For your merchants were the tycoons of the world, because all the nations were deceived by your magic spells. The blood of the saints and prophets was found in her, along with the blood of all those who have been killed on the earth." So it's not specifically stating it, but it's implying that these magical spells have obviously not only manipulated people but killed people as well. And even before I was a Christian, my gut feeling, which I always believe that my gut feeling is God. Even to unbelievers, God is always trying to reach unbelievers as well. And I believe that he was giving me this gut feeling that medication is not to be trusted. And I think it's almost obvious to people now anyway, but I know sometimes there's almost a need for medication, especially when you're going through a lot of pain and things like that, and I don't want to sound unsympathetic to those situations, but I think if you can try and go down the natural route, I would suggest doing so. There are two Christians who created a book which is dedicated to a biblical diet. So they've read and reread the Bible, and they've come up with a diet which is suitable for Christians. I try to follow that as much as I can. I'm not brilliant at it, but yeah, I try to follow what they say. And even things in the Old Testament where it says, the unclean foods would include fishes without scales and without fins, unhooved animals, pigs and things like that. So I used to love bacon. I try not to eat pork anymore. Things that would not really have meant anything to me now mean something to me, even though they are clean now. You're not going to go to hell for eating those foods. God said they were unclean for a reason. I know the things that I have made clean are now clean, so you could argue that maybe they're not unclean anymore, but I still take caution with certain foods like that. But that's what that book is all about. I'll play some clips for you throughout this video to show you what they were talking about, which was really, really interesting because they're very knowledgeable men, spirit-filled Christians, and they had some really interesting points in their video.
Wow. And don't even get me started on the childhood medications for various neurological disorders or maybe behavioral disorders,
even
ADHD for one. I want everyone to understand that is listening to my voice, you can be healed and delivered from behavioral and mental disorders. These are plaguing us today. Now that we have been so engrossed in social media and comparing ourselves to everyone else, you know what they say, we compare our worst days to someone else's highlight reel. This has caused our spirit and our soul to be so damaged that people are reaching out for antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications as a lifeline. And I believe it is disrupting our walk with Jesus, and it is greatly hurting us. And I don't want to just condemn people, because I know many people who are on these medications. There is hope. There are answers. In fact, off the air, Josh, we were just working with our favorite formulator who helps us at our companies, who created this amazing brain health supplement that you and I are both excited to take. Not because we have been diagnosed with a mental or behavioral disorder, but life is tough. I was just thinking this morning and praying about some struggles that I was dealing with. I'm not going to turn to something that shuts off my ability to connect with God and my imagination and creativity. I'm going to trust God, and I'm asking him to give me the answers. And one of them this morning was 45 minutes of morning sun with my eyes on the sun and my body, just because I knew that's what I needed after being out till midnight at a football game and knowing I was going to drive 6 hours today and all the things that are happening. But I want to say directly that if you're on an antidepressant and anti-anxiety medicine, pray and ask God to deliver you from what has been called a life sentence of mental illness, because I do believe, Josh, people can be healed from that.
Yeah, I mean, number one, go to the great physician. He will tell you, the Holy Spirit will lead you in the right direction there. I want to say this too, like, I'm speaking to this from somebody who's had experience. Like, I was the kid diagnosed with ADHD. I got put on Ritalin. I got put on Adderall. I only took them a short time because I could tell it was changing my personality, but I experienced those drugs. Listen, I went to the principal's office, I guarantee you, more than any kid in my elementary school, at least in my class, because I had such a hard time focusing in school. And it wasn't until I got to college and I had sort of a mindset shift, and I started really pursuing God in a stronger way. I changed my diet, and all of a sudden it's like I went from getting a almost 2.0 GPA in high school to above a 3.0, later on a 3.9 GPA. But again, I say that because it was God that helped change me. Following these principles of nature and doing that helped. And my mom was on an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety drug simultaneously, and I saw that it just made her worse for years and years and years. And it wasn't until she started meditating on the Bible day and night and focusing on things she loved to do that she was able to be set free and get off those drugs and medications. And also, I want to say, think about this. One of the side effects of antidepressants is suicidal thoughts or suicide. One of the reasons for that is, I remember reading a paper on this, when you take an antidepressant, you no longer have a full realization of what your reactions are going to cause. So like you actually kind of view things like this. You don't view things in light of eternity anymore. You kind of view things in the short term. And so you're not really stressed because you don't feel like what you do, you don't understand the outcomes, the true outcomes of your actions. So think about, somebody could kill themselves and not realize, no, that was the end. And so that's one of the side effects there. I do want to say as well, the Bible's got some great remedies it references. In Song of Solomon, it talks about saffron. There are some amazing studies on saffron for mood. There are things out there like St. John's wort, SAM-E, omega-3 fatty acids, zinc, vitamin D, and probiotics, all proven today with scientific literature. Many of these, at least the herbals we talked about, saffron, referenced in the Bible. We know the power of the sun. We know the power of community. These are the things that are truly going to help make you well. Is number one, turning to God and finding your true purpose and identity, and then living by God's design.
Absolutely.
I will link to their video down below as well. I'm just going to go through a few of the points that they went through, and then I'm going to talk you through why I think we should avoid pharmaceuticals as much as possible. Let's start off with their logo, for example. Maybe I'm going to sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist. I really don't care at this point. It's proven itself to be true over and over again. Their symbol symbol for pharmaceuticals and ambulances and the medical field in general is a snake. I can't say much more than that. Obviously, the Bible is warning us that pharmakia is dangerous and should not be messed with. And we know Satan rules the world. We know he has his fingers in every pot. So we can't rule out the thought process of him having influence in the medical field. We know that Jesus did miracle healings, and Jesus said we should go out and heal the sick, lay hands on people, do all of these things, which most, I can't even hazard a guess at what percentage, but it's got to be at least 90%. No, I would say it's more. I would say it's at least 95% of Christians are not going around laying hands on each other to heal each other. They're not praying for one another while they lay hands on each other to heal people. They're not in the evenings praying for the sick person at church or whatever, that they don't talk to that person, so they don't think to pray for that person. I think we would see a lot more miracles happening today if we actually followed the Bible for what it actually says that we are capable of doing in the name of Jesus. But I'm going to go through some other things that they talked about. Obviously, before someone else comments it below, pharmakia obviously doesn't necessarily mean pharmaceuticals, it means sorcery, but you are presuming that pharmaceuticals aren't sorcery. That's the issue. It's a man-made substance. God made everything in this world. We don't need to make potions to heal each other. We don't need to make a little pill that heals someone. But then if you look at the back of it, you see that there's 10 other contraindications that can happen due to taking this pill. And a lot of them, those contraindications include death or nausea or sickness or those are just the things that they know about, or the things that they want to tell you about. That doesn't include everything. I don't know if you've got any medication at home, I don't know if you've ever, I'm sure you have, but just have a look at the back, or have a look at the instruction booklet, and have a look at what the contraindications are stated on there. What does it say can happen from taking this? Kidney problems, death in some cases, nausea, just to name a few. And then of course, when you start taking that medicine, you end up needing to take another medicine to heal from the thing that first medication caused you to have. Before you know it, you're popping 10 pills a day, and that's exactly what happened to my grandpa. He would take so many pills every single day, and he was only getting worse and worse. And I know, obviously, he was getting older, but it just makes me sick. It makes me sick that they profit off of making people sick. So one important point that they brought up was that improved sanitation is what has increased lifespan. So science always takes the credit for increasing lifespan because of all of these miraculous things they've come up with. But when you look at the Bible actually warns us about hygiene in ways that we may not recognize it warning us about hygiene, because it wouldn't have meant really anything to the people back then.
System that's worshipped, but the Bible has been teaching this since the beginning of time.
Absolutely. I think we've talked about this before. When I was getting well from Crohn's colitis, I read 3 books after going to 69 medical experts, trying medications, every natural therapy you can think of. I read 3 powerful books, and one of them was called None of These Diseases. And one of the main messages was God's hygiene principles, sanitation principles, and how, if applied, they could have averted the bubonic plague in the Middle Ages. We're talking about simple things like bury your waste or excrement outside the camp a certain number of feet deep. This was before bacteria was discovered, thousands of years before, even during women's menstrual cycle, when they didn't have the same type of, let's say, hygienic menstrual products that they do today. They talked about where you could sit and how quickly someone else could sit on that same area, or a certain animal that shouldn't be eaten, or what we believe shouldn't be eaten, like a pig or a skunk or a rat. If water flowed on an animal and then it flowed on a vase or a vessel used for cooking, they said you needed to destroy the pot. They didn't know about bacteria. They didn't know about parasites. They didn't know about toxins, or did they? I believe every single day when I read the Bible, there's a chance for new revelation. But the pharmakia message is something that's been rumbling for a long time. And frankly, Josh, it's something that we don't want to know about. We want to avoid, and it is scary.
The Bible tells us certain things, like the priests had to, before they did rituals, they would have to do all of this cleansing and washing, and before they eat they have to wash their hands and stuff like that. All of God's laws, all of God's commandments are always to protect us and to protect others. You may not see it that way, but even even his commandment to love God above anything else, that protects us, because it stops us falling into idolatry, which then makes us captives of our own sin. It chains us to sin. So that was an interesting point. And obviously during Women's Time of the Month, they would be separated from people and all of these things to do with hygiene. But what's interesting about the contraindications of medicine is that not only does it affect your health, but it can also affect your mental state as well. And I can speak on this because when I was taking the contraceptive pill, I can't really explain how my mood changed. I can only say that it did. I became suicidal. I've been suicidal a few times throughout my life, but I became suicidal, and I don't want to necessarily link that just to the medicine because there were other things going on, but I do know that I did feel a shift in my energy. I was acting different. I had a shorter temper. Yeah, there was definitely a correlation there, and I think most women can agree that there's a correlation between when you're taking contraception and when you're not taking contraception. And then eventually I got to the point, this is before I was a Christian, by the way, and then eventually I got to the point where I wanted to take natural contraception because I didn't like the thought of taking all these chemicals and everything. I got the copper IUD, which is basically this really horrible looking device that gets inserted, and you can choose to either have the IUD, which has chemicals and everything in it, or you can have the copper one, which is the one that I got, that doesn't have any chemicals on it, or at least that's what they say. But I mean, putting something like that inside of your body in the first place is just not wise, really, is it? But at the time, you're just trusting science. But when you become a Christian, you realise how demonic and disgusting that actually is to do something like that. The shape of it, I know it's designed to go into your ovaries and everything, but the shape of it just makes me think of Satan as well. Like, it's literally a goat's head symbol. But when I took the copper contraception, my periods would be so intense. Like, I would bleed so much and I would be in so much pain. Normally, you know, obviously I'm uncomfortable or whatever, but I can deal with it. I can work as normal. When I was taking when I had the copper IUD, I couldn't do anything. I was in so much pain, bleeding a lot as well, so I had to constantly be going to the bathroom, and it was just not good. And I can't see what part of that is healthy for you. The first time I had it, because I had it taken out because it was so painful, and like I would struggle to sit down. I felt like, I don't know if it was just my head messing with me, but I looked up why I was in so much pain, because I was in pain like all of the time the first time around, and especially when I went to sit down or I was sitting in certain positions or something, it's almost like I could feel something digging inside of me. And then I did the stupid thing of Googling if anyone else had ever experienced that, and I came to find that for some people the IUD had actually pierced through their ovaries, and just horrible. So I had it removed because I was in so much pain, and the removal was painful as well, not to mention just not particularly pleasant to have. Nurses doing that to you is not particularly pleasant either. But then I just didn't want to go back onto pills or anything like that, so I decided that I was going to have it again. And the second time around, fortunately, it wasn't painful all of the time, but again, my periods were really bad again. I was in a lot of pain during my periods as well, just to the point that I couldn't do anything. And then obviously when I became a Christian, I had it removed straight away because firstly, I didn't need it anymore, and second of all, I didn't need it anymore because me and my boyfriend had broken up anyway. But also because being a Christian, it didn't, you know, I was being convicted that this is not something you should have inside of you. So I had it removed. Thank God. I prayed and I asked God to help me like have no pain this time when it was removed, and he granted my request, which he didn't have to do, but he did. And so it wasn't painful coming out the second time. But all that to say, you have to be so cautious with medications. And I remember as well when I was a child, I didn't like the thought of injections anyway, but I intentionally made sure I wasn't going to get these vaccines. So they had 2 queues going into this room and then another door coming out, and then the queue of people over here who had already had the vaccines. And I was queued up to obviously go in and have my vaccine, and I quickly ran to where the other, obviously they must have taken my name down or something because I have a a vague recollection of my mum taking me to the doctors to get these vaccines in the end. But so even as a child, I had an instinct that, and I think we all have that instinct whether we listen to it or not, which is God telling us. It's not just our own instincts, it's God warning us about these things. It's the Holy Spirit warning us about things. And it's only when you become a Christian that you discern that actually this is not a gut feeling, this is the Holy Spirit prompting me that this is not right. So natural medicine, prayer and fasting have been proven to heal. Even if you're a non-believer, if you look into natural remedies, a lot of times they will say if you fast from food for a certain period of time, that can cause miracles to happen, and that's biblical as well. Same with natural medicine, obviously. The Bible states that when you're ill, you should go to your elders and be prayed for and anointed with oil. How often do we see that happening in the church? How often do we see people going to the elders, having them pray for them, having them lay hands on them and be anointed with oil? We need to see that happening more in the body of Christ. We need to see us actually living by the things that God has laid out for us. I've heard stories, I can't remember exactly where I heard this from now, but I'm sure I watched a documentary or something on it. I think it was more about doctors in America than over here, but still. Doctors actually get paid for selling certain medications. So if they sell a certain amount or they sell a certain medication to someone, they get paid a percentage for selling that medication. I'm not saying all doctors do that, don't go in and start yelling at your doctor, but doctors also only know what they're told. Like, they are educated by a system that we know is corrupt. They're educated by a system that we know Satan has already dug his hands in, and we know Satan has already infiltrated the education systems. So doctors may not always know how bad things are. I would just be cautious that if your doctor is pushing you towards a certain product, don't just take it just because you trust your doctor. Be very, very cautious. 5 to 10 of the largest lawsuits, I don't know if this is just in America or if this is worldwide, I think it was worldwide, have all been against pharmaceutical companies or against pharmaceuticals. 5 to 10 of the largest lawsuits. So that tells you that they put these, it's like, let's just look at COVID for one example. When COVID happened, they came out with a vaccine so soon after this virus was sort of like released, if you want to put it that way. They came up with this solution, this vaccine. How can you trust the long-term effects of something that they've just suddenly brought out? How can they trust that this vaccine that they've brought out is actually going to stop this virus? It's not, they didn't have enough time to truly test this vaccine, and yet they're giving it out like candy. And not only that, but when they do that, I don't know if you watched the news during that time. I remember I obviously didn't get the vaccine, and I remember watching the news, and it was like an advert for the vaccine. They were promoting it, saying all these wonderful things about it, and then they were talking to, you know, your average Joe on the street, asking citizens what they thought about people who weren't getting vaccinated. And people had, I'm sure a lot of them were paid actors, I'm sure a lot of these people in the news are paid actors, but these people had been convinced or had been paid to say that they felt like people who weren't getting vaccinated were selfish because they were putting other people at risk. Make that make sense to me for a second, because how can, if you have been, so say I've been vaccinated, right? Or let's say you've been vaccinated and I've chosen not to be vaccinated and I get the virus. If you've been vaccinated and your vaccine works, apparently, why is me getting a virus, potentially dying, whatever, why is that selfish to you? Because if you've got that vaccine, you should not get the virus. Or if you do get the virus, it shouldn't hurt you as much. So the logic there doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I don't know what was in that vaccine, and I don't want to guess, but either it was just some sort of test to see how much people trusted the government, or potentially there was something in the vaccine that did something to people, or both. I don't know, and I don't want to really guess. Let's not forget that Satan always creates a counterfeit, a perverted version of what God creates. And God creates miracles, God creates natural remedies for us, and then we're going ahead and using these man-made medications that are full of goodness knows what, and just trusting that Satan, who rules the world, we're just trusting that he's going to give us something that's going to heal us. I think that's very misguided. And let's not forget that every time that you choose to take medication, you're actually risking your life. Every single time that you take medication, you're risking your life, because you don't know what effect that medication is going to have you, what side effect that medication is going to have on you. And I can't fact check this, I'm afraid, but there's a lot of things we can't fact check. And even when they are fact checked, can we actually trust the fact checker? There's a lot of questions there. I know that a lot of people who have promoted natural medicine have gone missing, or they have committed suicide. It's the same for people who've like created clean energy and stuff like that. They've gone missing, or they've committed suicide, or they've died in under some mysterious circumstances. So it's just an interesting point to state. I recently saw a news report of a child who had killed his friends because he was plagued over and over again with this thought that he wanted to commit murder. And so he shot 2 of his friends. What was interesting about that was, first of all, how the child responded to committing the murder. He felt awful about it. He just felt like it was something that was, it wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't his intention to do it, but I don't think it was his intention to do it, to be fair. Because it seemed to me it seemed like a demonic attack. The way he was talking, he was kind of saying he didn't know why, but he just couldn't get rid of this feeling that he was attracted to murder, he needed to murder someone. And the remorse and the empathy and the conviction after committing the murder that he had, and he just couldn't explain why he did it. It was just an overwhelming feeling that he just couldn't get rid of. But what was also interesting about that was that when he had his defense lawyer defending him, they brought a witness in, a professor, who argued that his medication that he was taking for, I think it was anxiety or something, has been shown to have side effects of people committing murder or wanting to commit murder or something like that, needing psychiatric help in some way, shape or form.
His 2 best friends in the head.
I'm going to talk to you something that's going to be very hard to talk about. Okay. And I have your son in the back seat of the patrol car because he's indicated to us that he took 2 people's lives today in your house.
I cannot believe this. No, this is insanity.
But the details of this tragedy only get wilder. While Connor unloaded his weapon on 2 of his friends, a 3rd friend heard everything after locking himself in the bathroom about 5 feet away.
Hello? Hello? Who's in here?
Hello, caller in the bathroom. Open the door. Let me see your hands. It's just me. I'm in crutches.
After making sure the surviving friend wasn't hiding any weapons, the officers escorted him outside to take his statement.
As we literally not even 2 minutes of being in the house, we come in, he's on the couch or something, he stands up, I walk right to the bathroom, I have to pee, and then I heard 2 loud gunshots, and everybody was quiet, and I felt like I could hear laughing, but I think it was just them breathing, and Connor was like, what have I done, and started crying, and I don't know where y'all found him, but I thought he was gonna shoot through the door or something.
Like I said, I just want you to take that in, because this is what really got me. It's like, how can you do this and then right after say, what have I done? What have I done? What if someone is helping pull the strings?
Perhaps the most intriguing part of this case is that the shooter, Connor Hilton, had no motive and no history of violence whatsoever. Even when the officers first arrived on the scene, Connor was waiting outside for them and seemed mortified by his own actions.
What happened? I screwed up so bad. Somebody hurt? Who's hurt?
2 people.
2 people.
2 teenage males.
Okay. Okay.
I think they're deceased.
I'm just going to detain you, okay?
There is no walkway. Why did I do this?
Where's the gun at, bud? I really have no clue. I need to be put in the mental hospital.
Dear God, I'm going to hell.
As Connor waited in the cruiser by himself, it was obvious that he felt remorseful. But as soon as the officer got into the car with him, his tone suddenly changed.
Where am I being transported to? Friendly. I know this isn't a time to be bringing this up, but are you having a good Christmas, officer?
After just a few minutes, he started to talk about the shooting, only to claim that he opened fire out of self-defense.
We got into an argument. Ethan tried to come at me. And I got freaked out, and he tried to grab for my throat.
What Connor just said was that during the few minutes that he and his friends were at his house, one of the victims, 18-year-old Ethan Riley, started an argument with him. Ethan then became physical with Connor and attempted to choke him. So Connor freaked out and opened fire, hitting both Ethan and the other victim, 19-year-old Benjamin Bleak. But there was one problem. this story didn't align with the evidence at all. Not only were there no signs of a struggle, but the witness who called 911 didn't see or hear any arguments break out. This seemed like a desperate attempt from Connor to justify his actions. When Connor arrived at the police station, one of the detectives was already there ready to swab Connor's hands for evidence.
Hey man, how are you? I'm doing good, everyone. It's pretty relaxed, okay? Do you know my parents are here? Yeah, I think you're my mom and dad.
He was then brought into an interrogation room for questioning.
Listen, what I gotta do
is read me my Miranda rights. I have the right to attorney.
But I'm gonna read them, man.
As they got into the questions, Connor began panicking.
So, do you catch that? I mean, the young man, just a few minutes after taking these 2 lives, is asking the officer, like, did you have a good Christmas? Let that sit there for a second. I mean, clinically, there's a word for that kind of disconnect. It's called psychopathy. And now I want to be careful again. I'm not going to diagnose Connor Hilton, but I want to talk about this for a minute because understanding this matters for how we see the world. Psychopathy is a condition marked by a lack of empathy, an absence of remorse, the ability to behave normally, even after doing something monstrous. Like I have a friend that I will never forget in college. I remember talking to him one night. We were out late and everything, and he literally told me that he had no feelings.
Both had this stupid finger on the trigger.
For some reason, it seemed that Connor had forgotten the story that he gave in the back of the cruiser.
He tried to come at me and I got freaked out.
This claim of self-defense was already hard to believe, but he eventually told the detectives a new story that sounded even more ridiculous. He is now saying that once he and his friends entered his house, he decided to show off his new gun when it unexpectedly fired. This story could explain how the first shot went off, but what about the second shot?
I've got 2 guys that are both been shot in the head, right? So, you know what I mean? Like, how does that happen as an accident? That's what I want you to explain to me.
With just a little bit of pushback from the detectives, Connor gave in and told them everything.
You know what? I need to be honest with you guys. I just need to be. Oh my god. Oh, okay. I've had homicidal thoughts for so long. I went up to Ethan and just. I'm sorry for lying. You guys are really sorry. I know it's gonna sound really like psychopathic and just like straight up disgusting. It's weird, but the idea of murder is just super interesting for me. I don't know why. I don't know why it is. I don't know why.
What did you think you were going to be able to achieve to help you by doing this tonight? Was it something you felt you had to do to be able to get this pressure off of you?
Yes, you said it right there. Those are the exact words.
As far as Connor could tell, there was no rhyme or reason for his urge to commit murder.
Evil. I convinced my mom to buy that gun for me so I can shoot somebody. And this feels so much better.
And just hours before the shooting, he posted a selfie on Instagram with the song Who Is Freddie Dredd playing in the background. And the lyrics were about killing people. It was clear that Connor had an unhealthy obsession with the content he was consuming.
What I did was wrong. I need to do the punishment. I know that. But I also need help. I need some help.
It breaks my heart. I mean, you could tell he just seems trapped. He seems bound. He doesn't even know why he's doing this. With one simple argument that may surprise you. Here we go.
I've met with him on multiple occasions, and he comes across as a very remorseful, I'll say, very, very remorseful young man who is just kind of one of your typical 17-year-old high school students. So it was very shocking. We are just now getting the evidence in the case. It really does, in my opinion, support the idea that this was a very, very serious mental health episode that caused this.
August 25th, 2025, a hearing was held to decide whether or not the defense could introduce a certain witness during the trial, Dr. Doug Bremner. Dr. Bremner is a professor of psychiatry and radiology at Emory University School of Medicine. His professional opinion was that at the time of the murder, Connor was in a state of psychosis due to his acne treatment. This opinion was based on a study Dr. Bremner conducted in 2005, which concluded that the chemical in Connor's acne treatment had major effects on the human brain.
There's the brain on the left before treatment, and then after 3 months of treatment, you can see there's a visible decrease in function in the upper part of the brain. Why is that important? What are we talking about? Because we know that that part of the brain is involved in depression and also impulsivity.
Even right on the packaging, it mentions a possibility of psychosis and violent behavior. Apparently, Connor had used this treatment in the past, long before the shooting, but had to stop because it was affecting him emotionally. However, in January of 2023, 1 year before the shooting, he started using it again. The defense claimed that this was the start of his concerning behavior, and over time, the homicidal thoughts slowly set in. Connor's history with his acne treatment, along with the fact that the prosecution couldn't pinpoint a motive, led Bremner to believe that Connor was experiencing a psychotic episode at the time of the shooting. However, the prosecution began questioning Dr. Bremner, and it became clear that his opinion was based on generalities and possibilities, not Connor's personal experience.
Said he was psychotic because he was taking the Accutane. I need you to draw a line and explain to me how Connor Hilton taking the Accutane made him insane at the time of the offense.
Well, we know that Accutane can cause psychosis.
In Connor Hilton.
And that's what happened with him.
Have you ever performed a brain scan of Connor Hilton?
No.
To discredit Dr. Bremner's opinion even further, they pointed to a more recent study from November of 2023 that said Connor's acne treatment does not cause an increased risk of psychosis. They believed that Connor's state of mind was crystal clear based on his general wherewithal when the authorities arrived at the scene.
Please ignore the fact that in this next clip, I'm talking about someone who's taking anxiety medication when this young boy was taking acne medication, but I think we can still apply the same message to all medications. So this medicine that's supposed to help someone who has anxiety or some kind of depression or some kind of more than likely demonic oppression or just a result of being chained to sin has a side effect of creating more psychological issues. If you get ill, it's good to look at your lifestyle, your diet. Are you getting enough sunshine? Are you getting enough exercise? Most importantly, make sure you're praying to God, you're trusting God in everything. Ask God to show you what you need to do in order to be healed, and then you'll get a nudge from the Holy Spirit to go and exercise, to eat a certain way, whatever it is. I need to have a bath after this because I'm still wearing the clothes that I wore to the gym, but we're going to ignore that. Potentially the reason why medications cause psychological issues obviously could just be due to whatever chemicals are actually in the sorcery. But also it could be that you then have open doors. I don't know if you've ever watched Ryan Miller interviewing the ex-Satanist Ryan, I can never say his last name, but when they've done their podcast together, Ryan talks about how you can have open doors as a Christian. And that's why Christians a lot of time need deliverance, because they don't read their Bible, they don't pray, they don't use their discernment, they don't have discernment, whatever it is, they are lacking in their armor of God, so they have open doors to the enemy and they don't even realize that they have those open doors. He has a deliverance ministry, and he also just talks on his YouTube and other people's channels as well about how you can make sure that you're not keeping doors open. At the end of the day, we all sin, whether we're a Christian or not, we all sin. I'm not saying it's acceptable, I'm not saying it's okay, but we struggle with sin all the time, but we do commit sin. So we all sometimes have more open doors than we should. But I think if you're getting involved in occult things, like you're getting involved in tarot or psychic readings or using a Ouija board, talking to dead people, you are worshipping false gods, or you're getting involved in sorcery, which would be pharmakia. When you're doing those things, you have open doors to demonic oppression and possession. I just think, obviously, the further that you get from God, the more access the enemy has to you. And that's why you see these poor young people who end up believing that they've been born into the wrong sex, and then they get sex change and they take all this medication to stop their bodies from producing certain hormones. I've seen numerous accounts of where these same people have then gone out and committed mass murder or done all of these horrific things.
The 23-year-old transgender Minneapolis shooter who murdered 2 children at a Catholic church, left a manifesto of disturbing demonic beliefs. CBN's Billy Hollowell joins me now. Billy, this is hard to process, hard to stomach. But what were some of his beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things they're still going through and trying to verify, but it seems pretty clear that many of the law enforcement involved think and believe that this manifesto came from him. Really apparently obsessed with school shootings. There was apparently an image, a shooting target that had a photograph, an image of Jesus on it. There were messages written on the weapons themselves, the term psycho killer. There were anti-Semitic messages. One of them read, 6 million wasn't enough, obviously referring to the Jewish people and the Holocaust. And it just goes on and on. Kill Donald Trump. Very confusing messaging. And from what we know, this particular individual apparently went to that school and graduated in 2017, was a student there from what some of the media reports are saying. So I think one of the big things, obviously, is you want to understand the motivation. What is it that made this person go and do this thing? And one of the struggles is that when you're dealing with evil, when you're dealing with illness, when you're dealing with all these factors, you're not always going to get a clear sense of what that is.
Well, as the father of 3 young children, this is beyond horrifying. But to me, and I might be stepping on some toes here, I don't think this is just mental illness. I think this is the most clear-cut demonic thing that you can possibly have. And if, people want to say something about that opinion, that's fine. But there, I'm going to say even more controversial things, but there does seem to be a stream of all of these rejections of what the God of the Bible is about that get grouped together, blended together. And it seems like there is a demonic backing to a lot of this concept. And to me, I think the perfect example is that, why is transgenderism and being against, certain Christian things and being horrifically anti-Semitic, how is that related? I think it's all related. I think at the end of the day, we've done a lot of stories about this, the hatred, not the criticism of the state of Israel, but the hatred of the Jewish people is at its core a hatred of the God of Israel, right? The hatred of the Jewish people is a hatred of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And as you said on his gun, it said 6 million wasn't enough, obviously referring to the Holocaust. He also said extra Jew gas, which, as someone who's been to Majdanek and Auschwitz a couple times, and Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, it is demonic to me. I'll stand on that wholeheartedly. I think I go right to Ephesians 6 for our struggle. And this is, I don't know why this is controversial, why people don't want to talk about this, but for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Now, that is a inconvenient topic if people want to just play nice Christian kumbaya. I do believe that there is, I don't believe, the Bible is clear that there is a demonic war. Obviously, I do believe Yeshua of Nazareth has defeated that entity. But obviously, Billy, you've actually started movies about the supernatural world. So how should we be processing all of this?
Yeah, everything you just said is so important. We don't want to talk about Ephesians 6. I think that a lot of churches have avoided it, this idea that what is happening in the spiritual realm that you can't see is pouring over into our world. And you're absolutely right. When you look at a story like this, when you look at a case like this, there's no other description for a man who would go up to a church window and shoot through it to kill children than diabolical evil. And so it does feel very much, and you were listing off a number of things, anti-Semitism, all these things that are rejections of the God of the Bible and his covenants with people and what all that is true and good. This individual reportedly also hating himself, right? What does Satan come to do? He comes to kill, to steal, to destroy, to confuse. All of these elements you see in a story like this, and you wonder, my goodness, how can people not see this as the diabolical Ephesians 6 evil that it is. I think as we process this, we've got to be praying through it. We've got to be, you have to imagine when a situation like this happens, okay, not only is the community devastated, the victims, their families, you have 14 kids who were injured, 3 adults, 2 children dead, all their families. You have the first responders who had to walk into a house of worship and deal with the unthinkable. You have the community. So the church, there's so many layers to it. We've got to be praying for them for peace. And, we've got to be coming together to have difficult conversations, right? About how did we get to a place in our culture, in our society, where we are having shootings happen every 2 minutes, stabbings happen, crazy events happen all the time. What is happening to people? And I think you and I probably have a good idea about what we think is happening spiritually, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People say they need psychiatric help and it's a psychological problem, but I think it's deeper than that. I think a lot of these things that we think are psychological issues are actually demonic oppression and possession. And we're not dealing with them biblically. We're not dealing with them the way that we should. And if we were to do that, we would wake up a lot more people and save a lot more souls. So when you're taking pharmakia, when you're taking pharmaceuticals, you are opening a door. But I think wherever possible, try and look into natural medication. Behavioural and mental disorders can be restored, not by antidepressants or etc., which can block us from our relationship with Jesus, but by trusting God and asking him what you need to change or what you need to do. Sometimes you just need some sunshine, but pray for deliverance. Pray for God to help you and he will help you. And ask others to help you as well. Ask others to pray for you.
One important thing to note would be that God may not always answer your prayers. Sometimes he leaves you afflicted for certain reasons, to prevent you from becoming prideful, to keep you close to him, any number of reasons that we don't fully understand. For example, the Apostle Paul, when he had a thorn, we don't know what that thorn is, whether it's literal or figurative, but God told him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." So sometimes we just have to accept that God isn't healing us for a specific reason that we don't fully understand.
Then there's been stories coming out recently of Ozempic, which is the pill that people take to make them skinny, how that has certain side effects as well, and people can die from taking Ozempic also. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a blessed day. Take care.
Ooh.